All right, so on today's lessons, we are going to be stacking dots on a map, which might not sound very impressive. However, you can actually do some pretty powerful things. So what we're looking at here is to the right, everyone moving to California from their respective county and state. And then over here on the left, I've actually separated California out. It's actually on a separate map. I can show you how that works, but that is everyone that is moving out of California. So I showed a previous animation of people moving out of the states and where they ended up, but let's actually look at a different perspective here and look at people moving to. And part of why we can do this is we can compare and contrast. So we can look at the towers and see, are more people moving to California or more people moving away from California? And this is during the time period of 2015 to 2019. And so you can see that there's definitely more people moving there. And you can look at that on a county by county basis, but you can also just aggregate this up by putting them all on top of one another and once again stacking, but not stacking per county, but just each state in general, each movement as a whole. And so we can see more people moved in than moved out. So to sort of break this apart, how we're going to structure this training is to be a little more specific and start smaller. So we're going to start with Delaware, which only has 3 counties. And we are going to start with that data. So I'll walk you through sort of step by step here, how we would essentially build this using that data. So I'm going to close this one. So this is Delaware, which is very small and basically has 3 counties. And so the data we're going to use comes from the US Census. If you search county to county migration flows, you'll find this data set. It's really awesome data set actually to explore and to just quickly go through just one step of that so you can see it. If I go into Connecticut as one example, let me zoom in here a little bit. What you'll see is that there's just a little bit of formatting that needs to be done on this spreadsheet. So there are cells that are actually more than one cell. And so by highlighting this all, I can click on merge and center. And did I freeze? Looks like I froze. Paolo, can you still hear me?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I muted it because I know you're doing the lesson right now.
yeah, no, that's good. So I think my computer just froze. So I apologize. I'm gonna have to just restart it really quickly. So if you want to rejoin that same link, I'll be back on in just like 1 minute.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. All right. All right, we are back. Sorry about that. Cool. Paulo, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So to pick up where I left off, we are going to look at the data set that is coming from the US Census. And so if you just search county to county migration flows, you will find that data sets. But to make it a little easier for today, I've gone ahead and loaded up a demo data set into a Google Drive folder, or just a Google Sheets. I called it Delaware, and I will share this and I'll put the link so you can get to it directly. But essentially the only things that have been done in this document that I was going through was there was just a little bit of manipulation that was needed to the header rows where it actually has a blank row in the very beginning. And I can try to open up the Excel document here. Give me just a moment. Okay, so if I go to Connecticut as an example, you'll see that there are a lot of fields here in the beginning that need to be unmerged. So we'll unmerge and center. And then we are left with this blank row, which we can delete. And there is actually a blank row, or sort of a blank row on the top. So we delete that as well, so that we have the header on the very first row. In addition, we have some blanks. These were for the margin of error calculations. And so we can just remove these. And so I've done that sort of already in this other documents for this Delaware. And so that's what's loaded here. So I'll go ahead and put this link just directly into the chat window for you, Paulo. But for anyone else, it would just be in the description of the video. So let me make sure to get that to you. Okay. So that will be the link, and I'm going to use that same link in the flow itself. So I'm going to minimize this and go back into the flow. And so the other thing that we are going to want to do is load an appropriate map. So yesterday, Bill covered how to load a custom map. So if we click on plus for the map, we will add a map, which by default adds the globe. And so we want to upload our own custom topology that looks at the county level details for the US. And so this is going to be in our demo media folder, which was in sort of the list of all the special links when you sign up, but I'll also provide that over here in the chat window. But this has a lot of different folders within it that are all very helpful in building a flow. So that are public there. And so let me paste that in too. And so within here, there is the topo JSON for the USA counties FIPS. And essentially we can load that into flow. So let me go ahead and do that real quick, and just so you can see that process. So when I click choose file, I'm going to load this USA counties FIPS and load that in. And so then by default, it will load in and load as a square here. And so this looks tiny, right, on this big map. But part of the reason why it shows that way, and actually the thing I've been starting to do a lot more, is to make this a sphere, because it really is actually part of a globe, and we're just looking at something more specific. And so that's been more of my go-to, but however you want to tackle it is totally up to you. But with this, the thing I've been starting to do is if I add some text in, I usually add text in at 000 and place that at 000 so I sort of have a reference point. And that way, what I do, instead of keeping the globe sort of in the center, I want the map to be really big, and it's almost like you're walking on it. And so to do that, I'm going to make the radius of the map much bigger, or the globe. So this is 4 meters now in radius, or 8 meters in diameter. So it's actually a huge globe. And if we were to, it's a really big globe. And so let me bring this down. And so this is that 000 mark that I marked for a reference point earlier. And that's going to be sort of where I want things to be centered. And so on the rotation side, What all I want to do is, this is the reset camera position. And so if I start to adjust the rotation here, I can move the map into a position that I want. And so because I've done this before, I sort of know a little bit of where to go, but that is going to be the position of the map. So we sort of have built a map, a custom map, and now we're going to layer our data on top of it. And I'm actually going to maybe move map down just a hair. Yeah, just a hair. And on the swarm, let's now load that data sets that we referenced. So instead of loading from a CSV, we're going to load from a Google spreadsheet. And so from that Google spreadsheet, we're just going to copy over the URL and import. And so as long as you have that same spreadsheet open, you have access to it, then the data will proceed. And so we're seeing all the dots, which is every row. And the thing we're going to use is, instead of using point per row, we're going to use point per value. And we're going to use the values that are coming from this column that says counterflow from geography A to geography B. And what that will make sense, and I'll explain it just a sec. But essentially what we're doing is each, if we go to the actual data sets, so we are going from geography A in this data set, which is state code and FIPS code, which I'm combining together, and the same for geographic B, GeoB. So people are moving. So basically, this is the flow from A to B. So from Delaware to a different state or county. So that's what this is looking at, from A to B. And then the other one, from B to A, is people moving to Delaware. So hopefully that all makes sense, but it took me a while to figure out, or to go through the differences between them. But one is the flow in and one is the flow out. That's sort of the basic summary of it. And so what we're looking at first is the flow out. So let's first stack these dots in their appropriate position. And so to do that, we will actually use this map to regions. And since we used our special map that has the right FIPS code to associate to, we can select the geography that we want it to start at. And so now we have begun the name of this lesson, which is stacking dots on a map. And so by default, we'll see just these small little dots on a map. And so let me bring these down a little bit. You'll see this offset from map button. And so that is why they are offset just a little bit. But the reason you only see 3 dots is because each of those dots actually is full of all the other dots that you saw just a second ago. There is a dot for every value that exists in this column. So there's 81 dots that are from Alaska moving to Kent County, Delaware. That's basically the way to interpret this. And so to show that, we need to space them out. And so this is sort of the main lesson here is, if we click on grid, what that will do, and I'm going to make it a lot smaller because we are talking about Delaware, which has a very small land mass. And so we're going to have to make the grid somewhat small to fit everything. I could also make the map a little bigger, but I think this can work for us, and make it maybe 0.75. Okay, so we're seeing the dots in their appropriate county. I want to change the colors so that it is a color scheme for those counties, which the counties that it's coming from is GeoA. So we have the 3 counties here represented, and now we can start to stack them. So I'm going to add a step just to show the animation going up, but it's within additional dimensions that we are going to play with dispersion shapes. And dispersion is basically thinking of if a dot is in the same width, height, and depth position, then it will move them around. That's basically what you're doing. And so you can define these differently so that it only looks at just width or just height to do the dispersion. But for now, that works for us. And there's also an easier way to get to this as well, which is just to click on this sort of fast menu, sort of a template menu of different 3-dimensional shapes you can start to play around with. So one you could do on this would be like stacks. which is basically exactly what we're going to be doing. So we are stacking those dots on top of one another in an ordered fashion. And so if we go from this first step, and I'll move the camera over here maybe, to this second step. It's kind of cool, actually. Okay, so click the next button. We'll see it all animate in. So this is kind of cool because Delaware is small enough that each dot is actually a single person from 2015 to 2019 that's going to be moving. So now we've placed it on a map, and let's look not where they're going from, but where they're going to. And so let's click on the Add Step button. And on this next step, we're going to basically keep things the same, but instead of looking at Geo A, we're going to change it to map to Geo B, which is where people are coming or where people are moving to. So this is the outflow from Delaware. Now, the other thing to note is you got a lot of, you might have a decent amount of intra-Delaware traffic. So people within Delaware moving from one county to another, which, yeah, would be represented. But it is kind of interesting, actually, here. You can see it's pretty much everyone stays around the Virginia area, Virginia, DC area. Interesting. And not many other places. And actually, I'm out of curiosity here. Let's add another step. And then let's do the opposite. Actually, sorry, let me delete that step. I don't need this fourth step. So on this one, what we'll do is we're going to duplicate this swarm. And on this duplication, we're going to look not at the counterflow, but the flow from B to A. So this is the opposite direction. And so now instead of starting at A, we're going to start at B, since this is where people are moving from. And then they're moving to Delaware. So let me change this back to B. Might take a second or two to render here since it is quite a lot of data. Oh, I just have it off, that's why. Okay, so there we go. And check one thing. Okay, so I want to make sure stacks are on for that as well. And this would be people moving to Delaware. So I'm actually going to leave these off since they might be confusing here in the beginning. And I would probably just add it as a separate step here to look at the other direction to say we're going from this perspective to another. So now we're going from GOB, and we want the stacks, and we're going to GOA with the stacks. So this is migration to Delaware, and then this is migration from Delaware. And so it's all basically driven by point per value and then selecting the actual column that's representative of that flow. So you have now basically built this in pretty short order here to basically stack the dots and be able to move them around and show the flow of people. Now, there's definitely more we could start to do here to make it more interactive, adding some interactions such as on rollover, I'm a big fan of, where basically you can say, this is people going from A to B, and that will show up. It'll show up just when you roll over the dots, and so that you get a kind of an easy way to just see what's going on or where you're looking. And there's more you definitely do in terms of highlighting. So we could highlight the GOA in this sense. And so this would be where people are coming from. And so when you highlight, it will highlight that everywhere. And we could even do this filtered as well, so that when you double click on it, it will filter to just show you that county that was being targeted in the beginning. So a lot of different options here, but I think, yeah, stacking dots is surprisingly powerful. So let me go ahead and pause there. I see you had a question as well, so sorry I kept barraging through here, but yeah, let me stop here and then let's pass it over to you, Paulo, to actually, one, ask any questions, but to have you start to build as well.
For sure, thanks. No worries. So as I was listening, I was seeing you build the stacks, and from what I understand, so each, I guess, block or section is, if I could like compare it to a slide in PowerPoint where you can transition the presentation from one slide to another, essentially, to showcase transition in the information or something like that, or show completely different information.
That's right. Yes. So thinking of these as like steps, as slides in a deck, or keyframes in an animation. Sort of they're sort of both. Where you can see the animation between the steps, but within a step, you have the ability to go deeper and click on things and interact with the content. And we're building more and more interactions in that. But that's the right way to think of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Also, when you gave the links earlier, the Google Drive link worked. The Google Docs, I apparently need access. I don't know what that.
Okay, got it. Sorry about that. Let me just double check.
That means
should be public. Okay, sorry about that. If you try that link again, it should work. Or
oh yes, it did. Perfect.
Yeah.
I see the spreadsheet.
Okay, great. Cool. So I'm going to stop the recording here, and then we can start to have you present and yeah, have this be a little bit more one-on-one.
This is cool. Super.